get to the interview. Let's get to the reason for this live session. So I'm Michelle Ray. My Substack is called States of Matter, and I mostly write memoir. I do write some poetry as well, but I have been lately doing more teaching. I'm working on my MFA and teaching people how to write about their personal experience has kind of become very important to me. And this month, we've really been focusing a lot on like a lyric style, and the lyric style of writing is really like imagistic and focusing on like sensory descriptions. So I thought it would be perfect opportunity to one of my poet friends on to chat about her poetry. So Lupe, I'll let her introduce herself a little bit more, but she is really just a very prolific poet. Like despite the fact that I've known her for 25 years, I hadn't really kept up. And in doing this interview, I've done some research, and she's won a lot of awards. She does translations, and she writes her own poetry, and she's won awards for both. So we have an award-winning poet on our hands here, people. Let's just recognize that. But so maybe I'll start with like the first question, and then I'll let you introduce yourself with that because I think it's they kind of coincide. So I think a lot of people tend to like write about identity. I think that's a very like common sort of subject, especially with poetry. And I know that's a big part of your writing, having this sort of dual identity. So could you describe your identity, kind of like, and how it shows up in your poetry?
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is really a huge blessing. I love to talk about poetry, and um, when it comes to identity and my work, I think that it shows up in the way that, being growing up in a dual lingual household really connected me to language early on in a way that it it became kind of like a toy or something to play with, something to experiment with was language. And my dad was a linguist. So we were exposed to other languages, although Spanish and English in my home were really the key ones. But with, that duality also comes with the culture of both of like Ecuadorian culture, Latin American culture. Um, so all of that kind of duality really, I think, is what comes through, and that kind of forms how I like to look at things. And then when I'm looking at things in two different ways, that creates opportunities to create images or to like play with language even more. So that's kind of where I think it starts. Like that's the genesis.
Okay, that's good. So I think you said one thing that I really relate to, and I think a lot of people can relate to, is like this idea of being experimental with your poetry. Um, and do you think that that experimental sort of like push that you had, did it come from like something you felt like you needed to say, or was it more like play, or both?
I think originally it was play. Honestly, like I think back to like what are the poets that influenced me when I was really young, like young. E. Cummings is like my guy, and I think it was because he just played with words and even just like visually on a page, it looked so fun, and so I wanted to do that too, and so that's where I think it started. But then later on, when I went to live in Ecuador and I was really immersed in the language because I was, taking classes in Spanish, high school courses were all in Spanish. That's where I was exposed to a lot of poetry in Spanish, Lorca, Neruda, Benedetti, Mistral. And so like that kind of like also stirred the pot a little bit, because I have like when you know two languages, you can't help but notice patterns that are similar, especially in roots of words. And so
Mhm.
like that just kind of made me really curious of what else can I do to play with this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's all about like play and having fun. And I think, writers need more of that. Like, I think sometimes writers like take themselves very seriously, like seriously writing here. When
Yeah.
like the playfulness, the joy, all of that such it's just so important, to come not only to like create your writing, but I think that comes through for the reader.
You're right. I've been listening recently to Rick Rubin, who wrote a book called, I think it's called The Creative Act. And he said something that really connected with me. First of all, I think maybe it was Maggie Smith who said, we have to give ourselves permission to write crap. And it's easy to do that as a poet, right? Because poetry or poems seem a little bit more disposable than, let's say, an essay or a short story. There's a lot of work that goes into those words, and
Mhm.
there's emphasis on the product.
Yeah.
Um, but Rick Rubin is like, we have to like think about who are we writing for, and our audience, ideally would be ourselves first. So if we are writing for ourselves, then that can make the stakes get a lot lower. And
Yes.
so, kind of like what you were saying about that. There's like, we want it to be perfect when it comes out, and that's a rare. It does happen, but it's rare.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And I think you're right about letting yourself be the first audience, and not just like I'm the first person because I have to be, but just like you're really writing to please yourself, right? Like
To fill that
it's for
need,
you.
that
Yeah.
urge, yeah.
Yeah, the urge. Well, I'm going to stop and recognize some of our new viewers here. So, welcome to Merlina, Lucy, Edgar, and Jamie. We really appreciate you coming on. And if you have any questions, you want to just pop in the chat anytime, feel free. So, my second question was about your early exposure, and you kind of already answered that. But on your website, which is amazing by the way, you talk about those poets like unlocking something in you, and like maybe you've already answered that question, but if there's anything else, like what specifically was it about, like a poem, or was there a specific poem that
So
like
that's
did that?
Yeah. Thanks for that question. I'm gonna, you're gonna get like the actual factual thing that
All
happened.
right, we love
Right?
it.
It's very vivid in my mind. When I was at the Colegio Americano of Guayaquil, as a student, we had to learn typing. That was one of our classes. It was like,
Right,
ninth, 10th grade. We had to bring our typewriters to class. And then the big project at the end of the year is we had to come in with a folder of all like 40 pages of typed things that were not from the homework. So we had to
right,
find things out in the wild to basically transcribe and
right.
copy and then present. So a friend of mine who had just graduated had done that, but she had copied poems. And of course, poems are short. They're
Yeah,
not like huge paragraphs. So I was like, that's brilliant because you're formatting the text and they're short. So I
right.
was looking through all the books that we were reading in ninth grade. Benedetti as one, but the biggest one that I love was Adolfo Becker.
Mhm.
And I loved his poems, and they were short. So I basically transcribed a ton of his poems into this folder, presented it, got an A, yay. But those lines got impregnated into my mind.
Oh my
And
God,
the
that's the
music
best.
of the language is what I think I got from that. And then I realized, wow, I can recite Adolfo Becker lines now because I was just typing away. So that I think is part of it. It's like there's a musicality to words that you can do both in poetry and in lyric prose. Um, and it was I think it's kind of like learning music, right? When you have a score on a page and there's breaths and there's stops and there's pauses, but then there's notes. Poetry can be very similar, or language is similar like that, or poetic language is similar.
Yes, yes, and I think that to me is what differentiates poetry is the musicality, like the sound element. I mean, the sound element is important to prose as well, but it is it's a legit part of a poem that I mean, every poet considers as they're writing. Right? You're not just considering the meaning of a word; you're considering the sound of the word and how it works with the rest of the words. So
Yeah.
that's like the best. I became a poet story. Like I was just trying to get out of doing a hard assignment. I love it.
It's like facts.
Yeah, but that's amazing, and I think I mean, I remember doing typing as well. Like we have those big electric typewriters, but there is something about typing. It's like this transcribing process. Like it's just like going through your
Yeah.
head. That's amazing. But
Yeah, like in teaching, going back to like the old school stuff with like total physical response, like that's like the total physical response. You're using the sensory and the auditory and then the mental and all those things are getting it in your brain.
yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It is, and so you were really early. Like you discovered poetry pretty early on, and then as I remember, you and I with our early publications in Ecuador. But then we talked before, and you mentioned that you just kind of like stopped writing around 1999. Then you didn't really pick it up again until you were in your 40s.
Yeah.
So, what was it that caused you to like pick it up again and then just like go for it? Like you just went for it. You got your NFA. You've like you're in all these literary magazines. You've won awards. So what was the impetus behind that?
So the reason why I stopped was because I was I there's a book by Julia Cameron called The Artist's Way,
Mhm.
and it's a great book. And one of the things that helped me, actually, one of my friends, Kartik Singh, who's a friend from American University, he's a director, and he told me about this book. And so I started doing the exercises, and one of the exercises is to recognize who your sensors are, identify them, call them out, and then just cancel them. So
Yeah.
you don't have that power over me anymore. So I was able to figure out who was censoring me, who was I allowing myself to be censored by,
Yeah.
and that stifled my voice and took away the desire to express and
Yeah.
to create. Honestly, it's not even to express; took away the desire to create, because creating is a vulnerable act that requires some kind of either feeling of safety or wanting to feel safe. So
Yes.
it was that identified my censors, and then I realized I'm just not going to let myself, be censored by that anymore. So that's when I started writing. It was really kind of like it was in 2013.
Hmm.
I could tell you exactly the moment when also the spark that happened. I was sitting in my car in a
Hmm.
parking lot of the bank running my errands because that was my alone time, was running errands. I have 5 children.
Yes.
Um, that's important. I was like, doing my mom thing, and I was listening to NPR, and On Being was doing an interview with Marie Howe,
Hmm.
who is a wonderful poet. And I was listening to this interview, and just something inside me broke. Like I was like, I have been shutting down this part of me for almost 15 years, and I can't do that to myself anymore. So I was just like, okay, I'm going to start small. I already knew that I could go to Artist's Way and do that kind of stuff, do morning pages. I started doing morning pages. And then I just started to let myself just play with words again. That was really just it. There was no aspirations. There was no like, I'm going to publish a book someday. Because the idea was not even like there. It was just like,
Yeah.
I just need to write myself out of this quagmire that I
Yes.
was in.
Yeah. I mean, I love how specific your memories are. My God, you have like the best. I mean, maybe that's the poet in you being so specific. I'm gonna move my phone again. Sorry. Okay. So it was kind of a moment like almost of like a threshold. Like you're like, I need to move from one part of my life to the next. Like I
Yeah.
have to grow. Like so there was like this thing that made you move. So and I love that you didn't make like put any pressure on yourself, like, oh, if I'm gonna do this, then I have to make it work. Like I have to be a famous poet or whatever. But when did
Well,
you
what it was is that I wanted to be me again.
yes.
That
Yes.
was the big thing. But yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
Oh
interrupt.
no, 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 that's perfect. And I think that's so authentic, and that's probably what helped you along the way, right? It's like you were searching for your authentic voice, or like trying to regain it before you were trying to put your voice out there. And I think that's such a crucial step. I think people it does take time to find your voice, right? And to understand like how your voice is carrying your message, because that is like it's a fine balance, because it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. Um, so I
Yeah.
mean, just maybe just like get into that before we get into process. Like, how do you see like like what is your message when you write? Do you sit down like do you have like a message to your readers, or is it just
That's
about
that's
play
a
and
great
like
question.
what's
I don't feel like I have a message. I have maybe messages that
Mhm,
are things that are like like through lines that mean things for me.
mhm,
But when I'm writing, I might at some point be like, oh, this aligns with this that I've been feeling and wanting to write more about. So like I'm going to maybe bring a little bit of that into this. Maybe sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not intentional. Sometimes I'll write something that purely just comes out, and then later on in revision, I'll be like, oh, there's that. Or in workshop, someone will say something I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize that that was there, and I'm grateful that that was there because I can maybe amp it up a little bit, or maybe rearrange things so it's a little bit more prominent because it aligns with something that's important to me. But I think that it's how I don't know how helpful it is to have a message as a poet. I think sometimes that can end up being boring after a while.
yeah,
So I think though that when you said that about voice, it reminds me of a poet that I love, who's also a friend of mine. His name is Gregory Pardlow, who's also a memoirist, by the way. He wrote a memoir about his dad, who was an air traffic controller back in the 80s when Reagan basically fired all the air traffic controllers.
mhm,
And so, what Greg says is that voice is choice. Voice is actually in poetry kind of a combination of choices that you make as a poet, um, with diction and image and the line and just all these different things that you bring into the poem that ends up being your voice.
mhm.
He also says it's kind of like when you walk into your house and you don't smell your house anymore, but but then you go away for a while, you come back and you're like, oh yeah, that's my house smell, but you don't realize it anymore because you've gotten so acclimated to it. It's like these choices that you make in your work that end up kind of coming off the page in that way.
Yeah,
It's hard to do that like intentionally.
yes,
Like
I agree.
I'm going to create this voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, it's nearly impossible, right? Just to create your voice, just to say, I'm going to establish my voice by doing this,
Yeah.
this.
So it's
But
more like
it's more like just
what
writing.
choices am
Like you
I
just
going to
have to keep
consistently make?
writing, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you feel like you find it, right? Like you feel like, oh, now it's making sense. Now it's like it's clear. Like
Mm-hmm.
when I look back at things I wrote like 4 5 years ago, or I feel like there's all this extra stuff that didn't need to be there. It's almost like it was like blocking my voice. And so I feel like for me it's been a process of like uncluttering it to like let my voice emerge. And I think that's poetry really helped me because like we mentioned earlier, poetry you have to is it like it's distillation. So like
Yeah.
you really have to make so many conscious choices all the time as you're writing. And yeah. So voice, I mean, I think all
Yeah.
the writers on here can agree. It's our most valuable tool as a writer, but it's also the most elusive.
Yeah, and it does. It's something that comes over time. It comes through being in community with other writers, where
Yes.
they can help you see yourself in ways that you can't necessarily see initially, and there's a consistency to it that is comes only through doing the work, right?
Yes.
And putting the words on the page like every day.
Yes. Oh, yes. So true. All right. This is actually segueing really nicely into the next section. So I wanted to like talk about your particular like education with
Mhm.
poetry. I know you have an MFA and you did some things that were more like structural that not everyone does or has access to. But I think everyone has access to like finding a mentor and like just reading poets and learning from poets on the page. But you actually had a formal mentor because you won
Yeah,
this. You were chosen by Maggie Smith to be her mentee. And if you all know who Maggie Smith is, like she's just a very famous,
She's
Syllable,
wonderful.
amazing poet and memoirist. I'm reading her memoir right now. We could make this
In
place.
person.
Yes, yes. I mean, she's just amazing. So when I realized that you were Maggie Smith's mentee, I was like, oh my God, she's famous. You're
Yeah.
famous by proxy. But so what did you learn by, obviously you learned a lot from Maggie Smith, but just the process of being a mentee, like having that learning from a person, like what
Yeah. Which is tough to do, especially when you're 54 going on 55 like me, right? Like, we're of a certain age that
yes.
lots of times our mentees might actually end up being younger than us,
Younger.
which
Mhm.
which we have to come, so Maggie's younger than me, which not is not an issue, but it's like, sometimes there's, you have to think about that. So I actually applied to the AWP mentor mentee. They have like, it's like a, not annual, I think it's biannual. Basically, it's a matchmaking service. They
Yeah.
take in a ton of applications, and then they have these volunteer mentees that volunteer for like a 3-month period, and then they say, here are some applications that we think might align with what you're looking for. And then they choose one. And then, if both parties agree, then all things
Yeah.
go forward. What I love about that is that it's a very structured program. So they actually have like, a suggested curriculum, so to speak, of like what to do, how to approach your meetings so that you're actually, which you can follow or not.
Mhm.
Back then, that was my very first time
Mhm.
really um, having a mentor mentee relationship. So it was all new to me. I learned a lot about like sometimes you go into a situation like that where you're like, tell me all the things, tell
Yeah.
me everything I don't know, which for me, that was kind of where I was at.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be very specific. You're like, I know I need specific help with this, and
Yeah.
you'll find a mentor that really can help you work through that. um, I call it like poetry therapy, sort of, in a way.
Mhm.
Can feel like that a little bit. But with Maggie, she was just very intentional about wanting to support another writer that was a mom, that was just really trying to like just come emerge into
Yeah.
the poetry scene. And that was really where she helped me the most, honestly, was giving me the courage to continue doing the work and putting my work out there.
Mhm.
Um, because up until that point, I think I only had one publication, and I kept yeah. So I was like, where should I submit? What, tell me about the work. Do you think that these poems that I'm writing, like, what are you seeing in them? Like, just kind of getting a sense of like what Maggie, about the poetry biz, for lack of a better word. How does this fit? Should I continue, kind of thing? And so that all of that really gave me the courage to continue, which
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is I'm so jealous. Was I turning green while you were talking?
No, I didn't. Well, if you did, I didn't notice. But the thing about it is that, like, I feel very grateful also because, like I said, she's not just a great poet and a great writer. Um, she is a mom. She's a working mom. She's a single mom. She has gone through similar life things, and so there's I think if you're looking for a mentor, it can be very helpful to find someone who has a couple of things in common with, you beyond just being a poet or a writer.
Yeah.
Because it kind of helps kind of cut through a lot of things, and you can
Yeah.
kind of get to the pulse of things a lot
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Mhm.
All right. So I
Had
want to
other
talk.
mentors since then, I just want to say.
Mhm.
Um, and so, so that's why I'm saying, like, you can kind of like, once you, like, you can find mentors for different things too.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay. Well, I just wanted to before I comment on that, welcome a few more. We have digital. Digital Marketing Crew, and Digital Marketing Crew says, I love this, and we're happy. We love you too. And feel free to ask some questions. And then we have also Ryan Maxwell joining us. Thank you so much. So Lupe was just talking about her experience with having a mentor, and she mentioned that she applied through AWP. For those of you who don't know, AWP is the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. So it's a great organization to join if you're, an aspiring writer. And they just have a lot of resources to help you. So Lupe just applied to be a mentor, and it's picked, like, she didn't have, at that point she didn't have a bunch of publications or any special education. Like, she just had a desire. And so I think it's a place, it's a resource, if anybody wants to look into it. And I just wanted to point out too that it's, just reach out to people. Like, I reached out to Lupe, maybe a year ago, about one of my poems, because I knew she was a poet, and I had this, connection with her from years ago. And she was very generous, with her time. Like, she read through it, she gave me a whole page of notes, so people are willing, to pass down, what they've learned, because they learned it from someone else as well. It's like, I think that's what's amazing about writing, is there's often like a lineage, there's a lineage that people respect, and they want to pass down, their what they've learned. So
So true. It's so,
yeah.
yeah.
So thank you
I
for
felt
saying.
I feel like I have a poetry family. Honestly, I really feel that way, and I have granddaddies and grandmommies, and I have poetry parents, and like my mentors in writing who have shared their mentors with the people that they're helping along. Like, those become my grand mentors. Like, it's funny, but I definitely feel that lineage is so true.
Yeah, it is. And I think because poetry can be a very small, it's like an insular community. It's like people don't think, I want to grow up and be a poet. Like, it's like you don't think you can actually like have a career as a poet often. And so I think the people that really embrace that, it's like it's a small community. But I mean, I think, one of the reasons I wanted to have this talk is to talk about how poetry can be accessible, and you don't have to call yourself a poet or like join an organization and have a mentor, but to write poetry. And I thought it would be nice to kind of shift into that, because that's what I really want people to understand. And I wanted somebody that has more experience with poetry to talk about it. So I personally, this is my personal belief. I think people feel like they have to have some like special skill or talent to write a poem, like more so than any other type of writing. So what would you say to that type of person? Like, I mean, what do you think it takes just to like write a poem? Like, what's an ingredient?
I think I think a main ingredient is to have a love for language, or maybe not necessarily a love for language, but to have the desire to play with words, and also like to be able to see words as playthings, that there's no, like, that you can break rules, and maybe sometimes you have to set the tone for yourself to give yourself permission to do that. Like, sometimes I will read poems from other poets that I know have done the things that I want to do next, and just to kind of like open up that, free up some of that mental space or capacity to give myself the permission to do the same.
Mhm.
I think a key ingredient is, language, enjoying language. Uh, if you read a lot, you know that there are some lines that have stuck with you because of their lyrical beauty.
Mhm.
Um, that, just being able to recognize lyrical beauty in all its forms is also, I think, a key ingredient. Um, Be maybe also another thing that to do is, and maybe so here's one thing that I'm going to share with you, like from one of my poetry granddaddies. So I had a mentor. Her name was Ginger Murchison,
Mhm.
and she, man, this lady was awesome. She was just awesome. She was 70 when, and so one of those older in life kind of writing poets as well.
Mhm.
Her mentor, Tom Lux, told her that poets hoard syllables like gold coins. So
Oh, that's
what that means is that when you're writing a line of poetry, and then you're going back to revise that line of poetry, you want those syllables to really kind of be earning their value, like every
Mhm.
single one of them. So I think that sometimes when we think of poetry and I'm writing a poetry, oh, we have to be so perfectly symmetrical and we have to be like, everything has to be so, especially if you tend to like poetic forms that sometimes have like a meter, then you might be like, oh, well, I can't write meter, therefore I can't write poetry. So I think that sometimes instead, if you focus it less on that and more on, is every syllable in this line maybe pulling its weight or adding and not detracting from the line? That's an easier way to look at a poem than trying to figure out, do I have 10 syllables or whatever? Because I can tell you, meter and I are not big friends.
Yeah, that's very
That's
hard.
not one of my strengths. And it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be one of your
No.
strengths, but just, I do count syllables though. I do count them just to kind of also play with them. See, like, hey, if I've got 13 here and I've got 11 there, maybe we can meet both lines in the middle and each have 12, just because. Not that anyone's going to notice but me, but things like that, just to be willing to play.
Yes. Yeah, because you're not just counting syllables because you want to know the number. Like the syllables, the number of syllables create a certain rhythm
Yeah.
on a line, right? So it's really about like the rhythmic nature because even when somebody's reading a poem in their head, it's still like the way the lines are formulated still teach them how to read it. And I think that to me, like that's a big part of being a poet. And um
Yeah, can I say something on that
yeah, of
note?
course.
So
Yeah.
there's a early on. So I started to go back to like our original story. So when I started writing poetry again, that was 2013. That
Mhm.
was when I had heard Krista Tippett and Marie Howe, and that's when I just started going, okay, I'm going to start writing. So I created like a WordPress blog for myself and just would write stuff and just post whatever came out. And I also joined an online poetry community called Diverse.
Mhm.
Diverse. And they just post prompts like twice a week, and then you share the link to what you wrote, and everyone cheers each other on, and that's it. But it
Yeah.
was a great place to start, right?
Yeah.
I learned through the diverse community about American sentences.
Mhm.
You know what that is?
Uh-uh.
American sentences are a poetic form that is kind of like a riff off of the haiku, and
Mhm.
essentially it's like you write a sentence with 17 syllables.
Oh.
Okay, so it's kind of like a monostitch in that it's like just a one-line poem, but you can actually stack them. So you can write, American sentences. You can write two or three of them, or whatever. But the 17 syllable is kind of prosy,
Mhm.
so it definitely kind of I find that it can be a nice bridge from writing like prose, bridging over to poetry, because it does require a certain distillation to get what you want to say across in 17 syllables.
Yeah. Okay. So you specifically like set out to like write these 17 syllable kind
Just
of
because it was a prompt on
yeah.
Diverse.
Yeah.
Like, again, I've never tried that before. But then
Yeah.
actually I learned about American sentences and if you Google it, you'll find a bunch of stuff about it. It's also a really cool way to, like, if you wanted to do like a one-liner poetry diary every day, just one line of
Mhm.
17 syllables, that's what some people do. They'll write like an American sentence every day. So
Yeah.
it's not a haiku. It's not a broken line. It doesn't have any line breaks.
It's
It's
just
just
one
one
line. Yeah.
sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good idea. I think to just like go out and search for those type of things that because that's giving yourself some like boundaries to play with, right? And I think poetry, it's about creating, but it's also about like shaping and editing yourself, like you said, like hoarding syllables and really like a really good poet and a really a good author, I think it's more about taking away. I mean, not more, but it's just as much about taking away as it is adding to. So
Yeah.
for a poet, it's really important to work with that. Like you said earlier about not being precious and just writing and making something disposable,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And if you feel really like attached to it, then put it away for a little bit, then come back to it with fresh eyes, and then start revising. But yeah, just giving yourself the liberty to write something that doesn't matter whether anyone sees it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I remember like that poem I shared with you. I like I remember you said, I think the poem starts on this line, and like what comes before it, meh.
It's like a throat clearing kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, but everything that came before it was like so precious to me. But I, I kind of still kept it, but I changed it a little bit, and maybe I like took some away from it. But then, like, and I ended up publishing it, so it did get published. Yeah, it was amazing. My first published poem or any published anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I know. But then I did like I wanted to create a companion poem to it. And so I just knocked that whole first part off and I started it on that line that you suggested. And it really helped. Like it brought like a whole new movement to the poem, and it allowed me to like create something else because I felt like it helped to create a question and to create movement. So, I think that like taking away can be really liberating too.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so we're at like 40 minutes. Maybe we'll just do a couple more questions here. I don't want to take up too much of your precious Sunday here. But so we talked about the essential ingredients. What would you say is the first step? Like, what was the first step you'd give someone who wants to engage with poetry but doesn't know where to start? I guess you've kind of already talked about this, but
That
uh,
is a great question, though.
I'm going to plug my.
Hmm.
I'll keep talking.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I wonder where one would start. If you're just wanting to, sometimes it's about developing your ear, right?
Yeah.
So I would say the American Academy of Poets has a poem a day where they just are publishing contemporary poetry from living poets, one poem per day. That's a great place to start. Another great place to start is a podcast called The Slowdown, which
Mhm.
was started by Tracy K. Smith, who's a poet laureate, and that was her poet laureate project.
Mhm.
It's now gone on to morph to like, other poets have taken who've been the host of that. Maggie Smith was the host for 1 year, I think. And basically they're just curating their poems that they know that they love. They just share and then they talk about them. I found that the slowdown is a really great way to kind of get my mind into that reverie that
Mhm.
is necessary to be able to kind of like see things in a different way and come up with poetic language. So I would just say start there by like, tuning your ear, and then morning pages. Honestly, morning pages are what kind of clear the crap. Clear, like they scoop all the leaves off the pool so you can kind of really dive in and be a little bit more less uh, cluttered in your thoughts and letting the world and the day creep in.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that that's just sort of like morning pages or whatever you call it, just like unfiltered writing, just blah 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 blah. It really
Yeah,
does help, clear your mind. And I
it's
think,
slow.
if you really want to be a writer, you have to get used to just wasting words. Like I think we know as teachers, like our students, like high school students, they never want to revise because like once they get the words on a page, they're like, they're like etched in stone to them.
It's so true.
But it's like
Yeah,
you just have to like words are like that's it's like your paint, and you have to be able to waste it to get to the goods,
it's so
the
true.
good stuff. But there was something you said earlier that I wanted to talk about because I think this is really important and it could be important for young or early poetry writers. So you talked about how like sometimes a poem is like a translation or like there's a almost a bridge that comes from like where the poem is in your mind to or no, I can't remember what we were talking about.
Yeah, I think what I was saying was that sometimes, um, like when we think of something that like a line or an image or something that we want to write about, that poetry can help us distill that down into something like that can end up being a window or a door for someone else when they read it, or for ourselves when we write it. So that's what I find that poetry helps me do. It is a bit of an act of translation, from like one perception to another, maybe ancillary or similar perception, but that may have more amplitude to it, even though it may be fewer words, or maybe it'll be one image, whereas maybe I was thinking about something much larger, but then if I distill it down into one thing, it actually opens it up even bigger. So that's kind of what poetry is in a way. It's like it's an act of translation,
Yeah, and
of
I really
meaning, of meaning.
of meaning. Yeah, no, I agree because it's almost like it's another language, right? So it's like a language of images or language of sounds. I don't know, but I think that is what really differentiates it because I think people tend to think that poetry is like what how it looks on the page is what differentiates it, but that how it looks on the page is like the vehicle for creating that the difference, like how it sounds and all of that. So
Yeah, yeah, the container.
yeah, yeah. So I had another question about. Oh, I know what I was going to ask you, and I don't know. I didn't mention this, but I don't know if you'd be willing to read a poem. Want to read a
Oh
poem?
my gosh, I would love to read a poem.
Yeah,
Um,
if I can talk while you if you want to go grab something, whatever.
yes, actually, I'm going to read a poem that just got published.
Yay! Okay, so for those of you who've just joined, we just had Chris join, and he says, in my poems, I tend to be able to express deep rooted truths before I can vocalize those emotions. Yes. And I think too, that's like the poem like is like the vehicle for saying things we haven't. It's like an emotion that we can't verbalize yet in any other way. Um, so again, this is this is Lupe Ide, and poet, educator from Florida, and she's been talking about her process with poetry, how she writes, why she writes. Very engaging and cool conversation, and so we're going to probably wrap it up here. When she's going to read a poem or two for us.
Okay, so this is the recent issue of Third Coast,
Mhm.
which is a journal out of Western Michigan University.
Yes.
And they actually published two of my poems, so I'll read one, and if we have time for the other one, I'll do that
Yeah.
one. And
Mhm.
I'll read the longer one first.
Okay.
Okay, so this one is called Ode to the Sugar Ants.
Mhm.
And let me go quickly to that page. Okay, Ode to the Sugar Ants. And this poem is after Eleni Vakala. The day we met was sticky and hot, and Abuelita left me a fresh carved orange in a napkin on her kitchen counter, mountain of sugar melting in the hollowed crater. And when I returned from the bathroom, you, comrades and cousins, had descended upon my juicy treat. Repulsed, I grabbed the orange with 2 fingers, arm's length from my 12-year-old body, chucked it in the trash can, into which I stared, helpless before your industry. Oh, sugar ants, benign troopers, subterranean builders, antenna as long as your fairy bodies, your frantic feet following a preordained path, you are a religion without priests or prophets. I recall Abuelita's anger when she found the orange in the garbage. Son hormiguitas, no hacen nada, she chastised, and I learned not to leave food out for more than a minute. You, legion, you, conquistadores, like Simon Bolivar, conquerors and liberators, my grandmother's kitchen was your Gran Colombia. You made me feel like Atahualpa, how you licked his bones clean. Nanometric Nimrods, many humid days I watched you to learn your ways, tracking your movements on windowsills, single file up door jams, and found no beginning and no end to your mysterious paths. Master surveyors, geodesic coordinates embedded in your every footfall, in the Venn diagram of your world and mine, in the overlap. You are the truth that marches on. Decades later, in Florida, you scavenge my desk for crumbs. You pop out from beneath the Y and U on my laptop keyboard, like Abuelita's words emerge from the crevices of my mind. Oh, sugar slurpers, oh, minuscule usurpers, you march circles around my universe, and at night, It's your breath that freezes around the moon.
Oh, damn, girl, that's so amazing. So as I was listening, I was like, there's just so many levels to that poem. How long did it take you to write that?
That poem, that's a great question. I actually wrote that poem, started writing that poem, I want to say in 2019 or 2020, 2020 maybe. Um, yeah, it was in a workshop, like
Mhm.
a creative writing poetry workshop called through O Miami. And it was just a draft, and then I just kept working on it, kept working on it, kept working on it. Really, like it was one of these poems that I loved that I was like, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's not a poem. It started with that line at the end. It started the genesis of that poem was the line from Eleni Bacala, which is that very end, it's your breath that freezes around the moon. And she wrote a poem that had that line in it, and I was like, I love that. And that just made me think of these ants. So that's kind of went back into memory and then just kind of connecting those two things.
Yeah.
Um, and then I just worked on that poem. So what are we in 2026?
Mhm.
So that 6 or 7 years before it got published. It takes a
That's
while.
awesome. So you just had it. It's not like you were working on it for 6 years straight, like every day you're working on the poem.
No,
But
no.
it was just a draft that,
Yeah.
and I think that's another thing that differentiates poetry is like you can work on it continuously, but sometimes it's like it takes your mind time to percolate. Like it's like the poem is on your back burner, and it's like
Hmm.
it's writing itself back there,
Yeah.
and that happens with a lot of different styles of writing,
Yeah.
but I
You know,
think go
they
ahead.
say that there's the thing about poetry, and this might happen with other forms of writing as well.
Mhm.
Um, that there's like a stage of composting that you need to do sometimes with your work.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so when you write it and just kind of put it away for a while, let it kind of go, in the dirt, and then come bring it back up, and it's a little bit, you can kind of pull out the nuggets a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that poem, it's just, there's a lot of movement in the poem, right? Like movement from your childhood to your adulthood, movement from different places, being in one country to the other, different movement in language. So, like, I know that takes a lot more effort, but, it also has like, there's so much sound, like the sound quality, with um, the sugar and the ants, and I could really see like and visualize the ants. So it's firing on a lot of levels.
Yay! I'm glad you liked
It's
it.
amazing.
That makes me happy.
Yeah, and I think what Chris said. That's it. You didn't hear this earlier because you were looking for your poem, but he said, I tend to be able to express deep rooted truths before I can vocalize them. Um,
Mm.
before you can vocalize those emotions. And I think that kind of gets to your translation thing, right? It's like poetry is the way that you can only express certain things, right? Just
Yeah.
like in other languages, like there's no certain words from one language to the other. So like as a translator, like you have to figure out how to say this one word that doesn't translate.
Yeah, and kind of to what you said, Chris. For me, and I find this to be also with Oriette, whose work I translated. Poetry is an act of survival.
Yeah.
It has been a way for me to be able to survive my circumstances, and I say that I know that sounds really dire. It's not dire, dire for me at the moment, but not like
Yeah.
not life or death, but just
Yeah.
definitely still feeling like I needed to somehow survive the circumstances. And so the act of writing can be an act of just self-preservation. Um, I know for sure that it was like that for Oriette, who was living in Venezuela when she wrote the poems that became the book that that
Mhm.
got published and then that I was able to translate. Um, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
strong motivator.
Yeah. And Chris is he writes a lot of poetry, mainly poetry, on here on Substack. And he's a caregiver, so he tends to write a lot about his son. He caregives his son, so it is like I think he could probably relate to that sort of act of survival. And then we have Esther that just joined us, and Corey. Um, so thank you all for joining us. Lupe is just sharing some of her poetry with us. So the last poem she read, would you just introduce that one again, and then
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just share
So
the next one.
So I read Ode to the Sugar Ants, which was in the recent issue of the Third Coast. And then this next one that I'll read, which is the other one that they published, is called Triptych of Daphilia Disowned. 1. Land rich, cash poor, Los Gonzales y Guerrero throw shade from the family box, a perpetual taurine festival. Legend says my grandfather walked into the ring to impress Daphilia, but my mother says that's bull. I imagine Daphilia, the bullfighter, standing defiant against Carmen, oldest sister, the curmudgeon. 2. Daphilia in sienna lipstick, wearing a flowered dress. Baggage on the dirt floor of the house in Alausi. The day Guillermo came for her, sepia picture of him standing still beside an old Chevy truck. Strange mixture of joy and worry in young eyes. No one waving goodbye. 3. Imagine dirt floors turned to mud in Alausi. Veiled mirrors, 50 years of sitting Shiva. Onion skin paper fills drawers, and Daphilia's November handwriting gathers like cobwebs. Marrying down, marrying other, sins fully covered by an umbrella policy of silence in perpetuity.
At
So
the
that
end,
one kind
I
of
thought
goes
your
back
turn.
to
Go
my
ahead.
grandmother. That's, me interpreting what happened when my grandmother was disowned for marrying my grandfather.
Oh my God, that's amazing. I love
And
this
they're both dead.
triptych.
So I don't know
Yeah.
what that story is fully.
So it's
But
like the triptych is that so you would try to have like three movements in that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's amazing.
I love triptychs and I love ekphrastic, writing it ekphrastically or thinking of writing as visual art, only painting with words. And
Yeah.
so I'll think of self portraits, diptychs, triptychs, landscapes, things like that.
Yeah.
Those are all cool ways to use words.
Yeah. What's ekphrastic again? I forgot.
Yeah, so ekphrastic is when you see like a work of art, and it could be any work of art. It could be
Yeah.
a drama, it could be music, it could be a sculpture, it could be a painting, it could be a drawing, it could be a photograph, it could be another poem,
Yeah.
and then writing based off of that.
Oh, okay. So
That's your launch off. That's your
like you're kind of interpreting it or you're using it.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Like the I don't know, a famous poem that is ekphrastic is the poem called Archaic Torso of. Okay, I can't remember the title, but it's a poem. It's a
Right.
poem where you must change your life is at the end, something like that. Anyway, it's about archaic torso of Apollo, I think it is, and it's an ekphrastic. It's about this torso, but it becomes a poem, so it's kind of.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound like a translation too.
Yes, totally. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I
That's
love
our
that.
thing. All right. I just wanted to read a comment from Corey Feiner. She says, I feel like poetry was a gift from the heavens for me. Growing up, oh, sorry, growing up when felt like most of me, wait, sorry, I can't read this. Growing up, growing up when felt like almost all of me of dying, was there one small spark that refused to die. And that was through poetry. It preserved that part. It preserved that part until I could get bigger and bigger and became my whole being. Sorry. It's so hard to read that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
then she wrote, it's so interesting how you changed your language to almost legalize at the end and how the coldness comes through in that.
Yeah, good. Yeah, wow.
That's
That's
Corey
so
Feiner.
true. Yeah, that's so
Thank you,
true.
Corey. Thank you so much for commenting and being so present with our conversation here. We love it. And thank you for sharing those poems.
Thank you.
Where else can people read your work?
First of all, thank you for giving me a chance to read them. I have never read the Daphilia one out loud, so it's like the first time I get to read it.
Yeah, great. I love both of
That's
them.
why I was like, I paused for a minute, like, whoa, how do I've never actually read this one. My website is notenoughpoetry.com. It's my author website, but it has links to a lot of the publications of poems over the years, a lot of which are in my current manuscripts, so that are out there looking for a publisher. So that's
Yeah.
a great way. Another thing you could do is just, I'm also a translator, so I've translated Venezuelan poet Ordiet de Angelo's one of her books, and I've translated her other work as well. You'll find the translations on there, but then there's also the actual book is called Homeland of Swarms.
Yes. I bought
And
that. I remember you posted that. It's really
yeah,
good. Mhm.
yeah. Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I bought it.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Glad. Yeah. So her work is very prose, like she has a lot of prose poems in
Yeah.
that. That's another thing I kind of want to encourage folks to do if you are more of a prose writer but want to kind of bridge to poetry. Think of prose poems. Look up prose poems on the Poetry Foundation website and on American Academy of Poets, and so you can kind of get a sense of what's out there and how are people using that form. Because prose poetry is really cool. I love it. It
Yeah.
makes me so happy.
Yeah, I agree. And there are a lot right now. I feel like hybrid, like poetry prose is very,
Yeah.
I want to say like hot or
It
present. I don't know what the word
yes,
is.
yes,
Um,
it is.
and
Um,
that's also, you could look up that like just hybrid forms.
mm-hmm,
Because,
mm-hmm.
I mean, poetry is so versatile. Like you can incorporate it. I mean, not you can incorporate it as verse, but you can incorporate just poetic language into your writing to really make it sing. I think.
I think so too. Um,
Uh, all right. Well, last question because we're like on an hour now. But um, who would you say like if somebody was like to pick up like a poet, a book? Who's like your favorite? Who do you think like everyone should read?
wow. I
Try
I
to have a favorite, but
Yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite, but I would say that one book that really was that I just love and I think a lot of people would really enjoy that kind of embodies a lot of what we're talking about today is Ross Gay's Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Ross Gay is just a great poet. He's an amazing, wonderful human being as well.
mhm,
Um, and that book is really lovely, and it's
mhm,
very like it just kind of embraces the everyday in a unique way. And his poetic language is gorgeous. He's got some really gorgeous poems in there, but it's also very accessible language. It's not lofty. It's Ross Gay in general. His poetry is just really awesome. So that's a great place to start. If you're more of like, yeah, but I want something more like like lyrical, imagistic, like those types of poems that kind of like twist my brain into knots, kind of
yeah,
thing.
mhm,
Because there's different ways that people enjoy poetry. I would say that Dorianne Lowe,
mhm,
Laux, is amazing. She recently was up for the Pulitzer. Also, I love Marie Howe.
mhm.
Um, Her book the this is how like wait the living ah I'm gonna butcher the name of the book, but anyway, there's
Yeah.
Marie Howe.
Okay.
um The Good Thief, that's the one I'm thinking of. The Good Thief. um just yeah, those are three that you cannot go wrong with at all. It's
And
hard. I'm
books.
looking at my all my shelves and going, oh my gosh, how um but I also can't say enough good things about an anthology that exists. It's an anthology of African American poetry that was put out a couple years ago by Kevin Young, who edited it, and
Mhm.
it has got such a amazing scope of poetry from like the 1800s to like now. So you're just gonna get all of those amazing African American poets like Rita Dove and just everybody is in there. I love Jean Toomer. Okay, so I'm gonna stop because I'm just gonna like my brain's just gonna keep going. And
Oh, Jean Stewart is amazing. I love
I
her.
love Jean
Yeah.
Toomer.
Yeah.
Also,
I
kind of there's some prose poems in there too.
yeah. Yeah. I remember I took a class in college. It was the African American Renaissance time. What's it called? There's a specific
Yeah,
word.
yeah, the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah, Harlem Renaissance. Yeah, like I didn't even know all those poets existed, like Jean Toomer, and they're just like so amazing. Like it goes, goes beyond Langston Hughes, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
And some
Oh,
of them,
way
most
beyond.
poets are like so distilled and so powerful because of the time period they were writing in.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think also most of them are very accessible.
You know, another thing that I definitely feel like I need to plug that is something that really is a great resource for poetry, but also kind of like learning about poetry, not just hearing great poems, is Poetry in America.
Mhm.
Poetry in America is actually like a PBS TV show,
Mhm.
and they dive into one poem every single 30-minute episode, but then they have all of these like really important figures talk about the poem, so they're
Mhm.
basically like doing a close reading of a poem, but like they'll have like, just all these different really cool, interesting people making connections to the poem. They're in their fifth season, and they also have a Substack called Along These Lines. So I would definitely check out Poetry in America.
Yeah, I will. I'll check that out. So, oh my gosh, you're giving us so many interesting resources to check out and poets. And of course, we'll post this video, and I will also I'll get the transcript and I'll create a post where I'll highlight all of the different resources that you mentioned because they're so valuable. And it's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. I mean, not only because of all the amazing information you shared, but also just to see you. I mean,
It's been so good to see you too, Michelle. Honestly, I was so tickled when you asked me to do this, but also like, we need to stay in touch. We need to chat more often.
I know, and you know what? Like, this is kind of weird. I'm going to say it online, but of everyone. But so it was like maybe 3 years ago. I can't remember. It was a good chunk of time ago, and I was out running, and for no reason at all, you just popped into my head, and it was a very strong like you need to like get in touch with Lupe. I mean, it was just so weird. I was like, I actually have to get in touch with Lupe because I feel like God is like sending me a message, and then I never did.
But
But it
you
was
did
just
eventually. That's all
yeah,
that
but it was
matters.
just so weird, like I feel like that happens sometimes, and I feel like that happens with poetry too. Like sometimes a line, image just emerges, and it's like we talked about the urgency. Like sometimes you just like you have to write it, right? And like it's
Yeah.
almost like you're what's the word? You're like in the middle. There's a word for it. Like you're channeling it. Like you're a
Yes.
vessel.
Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that a lot in she has a book
Yes,
called Big Magic. Have you read that book?
yes, yes. It's
Man,
amazing.
that book is so. She talks about channeling, and I feel very strongly that that works. I hate that word because it sounds so like woo woo,
Woo woo,
but it
yeah.
is a way to kind of like receive, like you're receiving something that and it's like you're gonna either run with it or not, or it'll just move on to something else, someone else.
Yeah, yeah, that's what she says. Like, if you're not open to it, it's like it just moves on.
Yep.
And so I think it is really important to be open to it. And one way that you can block it is by not thinking that you know how to write what you're receiving, and if you're receiving that, you already know how to write it because it's in your head, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to let it come out. And it doesn't have to be a poem, it doesn't have to be anything. Like it just needs to come out of your head and get on the page, and then you work with it over the
Yeah.
time, over years, over months, over days, however long you want to work with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Totally.
what I love about poetry too. Like you said, that first poem you worked with for 6 years, and then you finally felt like, okay, it's done, it's fully baked, and I'm sure like you'll go back to it and say, well, maybe I can do this or that.
And you know what? I kind of, so my battery might die. So if I all of a sudden glitch out, you know what happened. Okay. But I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah,
going
I
to
know.
say,
We just keep talking. We could
okay.
probably talk for hours about poetry.
Yes, probably. But the thing about that poem, the Ode to the Sugar Ants, is that I want to say that that poem was probably officially done and baked sometime in like 2022 because I had written it, I'd workshopped it a lot. I finally got it to a place where I'm like, I got solid feedback on it from a poet that I really trust. And I made the changes, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is it. And then I started sending it out. So I sent it out, God knows how many times to how many places. It did actually get accepted in December of 2023, but because of the production cycle, it didn't
Yeah.
actually get published until now.
Oh my
So
god.
that's the other thing. You have to like just have just believe in your work and believe in your poems and know that they're going to come out when they come out and not worry about the rest. Like it I think before that poem got accepted, I must have sent it out 50 times.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's not because it was not a good poem. It just was not resonating with the right readers until finally
Right.
it did. You know, so there that comes. You know, the rejection, getting used to rejection is the probably another thing that's really helpful as a writer in general. And so like there's a thing on in the binders on Facebook where we like all celebrate our rejections and try to get to 100 rejections a year because that's like somehow destigmatizes it.
Yeah. Well, and it's just, yeah, it shows that you're trying, it shows
Yeah.
how hard you're trying, because it does take. I mean, I'm an internship with, a few literary magazines and like Guernica, and to get into Guernica, I mean, it's like maybe you have like a 0.5% chance or something,
Yeah.
because of the number of submissions, how specific that magazine is, like what they want and what they expect. And like they only publish, like, so I read for nonfiction, they only publish 2 a month.
Yeah.
And like we have hundreds and hundreds, we're like 10
Yeah.
months behind in the reading. Because
Yeah.
so you just have to know that it's not you. It's just,
Right.
it's like the stars have to align. It's almost like a lottery to get it.
It kind of is. It does feel a little bit like a
Yeah,
lottery.
but it's worth it. I mean, because eventually you will get published if you keep trying. It's a numbers game.
It is, but then that kind of brings us full circle to what we were talking about in the very beginning, which is that we have to be content that what we're writing is for us.
Yes.
And if others get to see it, or if others, that's great. But
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's really just it's an offering that we're making to
Yeah. No,
ourselves.
I agree. And yeah, I don't want to end on a note like people think like, oh, event, that's the purpose to publish, because it really
Yeah,
isn't. But I think there is a point in the writer's life where they do want to feel like validated. They want to feel like engagement with their work. And
we
that
do
doesn't,
need that.
yeah, I don't think it has to be published per se, but I think you need to put it out there, right? You can put it out there on
Mhm.
Substack. There's so many opportunities for poetry readings. Like almost any library in your community has poetry readings. Oftentimes coffee shops will have poetry readings. So like that, there's a lot of different ways you can share your work, and doesn't have to be publishing it and having a standard, and like all this validation. So
I totally agree with that. I think
yeah,
you're right. Yeah, there is an element to writing creatively that does kind of beg for an audience outside of ourselves. So we definitely, you know, it's helpful to give ourselves the opportunity to do that. Is there are more challenging ways and there are less challenging ways, and a mixture of both is probably good because then we get like satisfaction on different levels.
yeah, and you get
um,
feedback. Feedback is
yeah,
important to help you understand like what's resonating and what isn't. Like I remember I wrote a lot of poetry in high school and college, and then I did poetry readings, just at coffee shops around Kansas City when I was in my early 20s. And I actually found a stack of those poems. I don't know how, like they were hard copies. I don't know how I still have them with me because I've moved like 42 times.
that's like gold.
Yeah, but I look at these poems and I'm like, oh my God. I was reading these poems like out loud to people. But I mean, that was my reality at that time, and I remember reading those poems with conviction, and I remember people responding to them, and so it was just like it was a time in my life, and it reflected something true about me then, and I think that's important,
I have a question for you.
yeah,
So you're doing your MFA right now in
yeah,
creative nonfiction, correct?
yeah.
So before you started your MFA, what are ways in which you actually put your work out there, got feedback? What were some of the things that you chose to do?
I mean, I had a blog for a while, like when I was traveling. I had like a travel blog, because that's when I really got interested in like travel writing. So I mean, I was traveling a lot, and I wanted people to experience like what I was experiencing, but I also was like processing the places that I went. So I found like writing an essay about it, or writing a descriptive piece, like helped me understand the place like on a different level. So that was like probably the first way that I was actually like putting my writing out there, besides in my early days of reading poetry. And then I would just send it. Like I would send mass emails of these essays to people, like just friends and, or I'd post it on Facebook or whatever. So it was really like just kind of spamming people with my, with my writing. Like I didn't really know how to publish. I mean, I feel like you and I come from this generation where publishing was such a different thing when we were younger, like it was so opaque. Like there was no process. I didn't understand that anyone could really become a writer. Like I felt like it was something that was out there, that it wasn't accessible to me. Um,
Yeah.
so my
Thankfully
writing
that
and
changed
publishing
though.
was two different things. What?
I said thankfully that changed though, especially
Oh,
with the advent of the internet, right?
yes. Yeah.
Um,
So we have so many more
so
choices now.
so what did you do? So once you had started writing and you, I mean, obviously got to a point where you're like, okay, I think I'm pretty good at this.
Mhm.
How did you level up? Because to bridge the gap from writing for yourself and on your blog and for that audience to then saying, I'm going to actually hone my craft and apply to MFA programs, like how did you bridge that gap?
Well, I think it was when I started writing my memoir, because that's when I felt like, okay, I actually want to try to publish this thing, I needed a community. Like I needed more like structured feedback.
Yeah.
I wanted more accountability. So I think, that, and then once I got into the MFA program, I realized like, okay, no, it is actually possible for me to publish this thing. And it's such a process, like such a long process writing it and like getting it to the stage that I think it can, it's publishable. I mean, I'm self-publishing it, but I could have self-published it 2 years ago. Like I've been writing this thing for 6 years. But I didn't. I mean, like I wanted it to be better and better and better, so this time I feel like I mean, I could probably write it for another 2 years or something, but I feel like it's isn't the right place for me to just like, because I'm kind of like done with writing this writing project. I feel like I need to move on. And
Mhm.
it's as good as it's going to be right for me. Like right now, I feel like it's at the point where it's other people can access it and read it and get something out of it. It's not just my story. Like there's a universal component to it that I was reaching for, and I hope achieve. So
That's okay, cool. That's I was wondering about that because I do feel like so when I was just writing, right? And I was in this like diverse community, I craved growth,
mhm.
but from them, their whole thing was just like supporting each other
Yeah,
as poets. Um, it was not critical, right? Or I hate that word, but it was not like um, so that's when I'm like, okay, I need to connect with people who are willing to look at it in a more critical way so that I can actually like say, really truly gauge, is this actually publishable? you know,
right.
um, so that's where I started like finding workshops and things like that to go to. And I feel like that really helped my writing a lot. And it also helped me learn how to talk about the writing
Yeah.
and and seeing how other
Oh, I feel like it's possible that her phone might be dying. Oh, here come my dogs. Yeah, I think it's Lupe's phone has died. So we're actually a little bit over our time anyway. Like I said, I think we could just like keep talking about this forever. But Lupe is really a very talented poet, and I hope everyone got a lot out of this talk. And like I said, I'll post some resources, and you can also feel free to reach out to her. She actually has a Substack. Her Substack is more about her career. She's also an educator, and she works with families who homeschool their kids. So, but you can reach her on Substack as well, and through her blog, or through her website, Not Enough Poems, or just Lupita Ide Tucker. Just Google her. You'll find a lot of information. So, thank you all for joining. We really appreciate you being here. And yeah, again, my Substack is States of Matter, and I hope to all see you, out there on Substack. Take care, everyone.